Hey internet friends. Not too long ago, those who sought total and complete control over a society did so not on the basis of exemplifying exceptional character or extraordinary ability, but they operated under what was known as the divine right of kings, or the assertion that a king, viewed as a god in his own respect, was not subject to the will of his people, but only to be judged by God himself. These mighty men of old were successful in convincing others that God's mandate flowed through their veins, and that everyday people should spend the best years of their lives working to secure the social order of their realm. And for a time, this was how the world worked. Documented in history books with the blood of the ordinary used as the ink to write a version of the past. But in a post-American Revolution society, it would seem like the divine rights of kings would be a distant memory. But is the reality really so? Do certain bloodlines still hold power within our current government system? And if all US presidents are somehow united in blood, does that mean our leaders are really elected by the people? Or does that mean they're selected by the few? Recently, there's been a surge of renewed interest in a story that hit the mainstream a number of years ago, when Bridget, a 12-year-old student, discovered that all of the United States presidents, with the exception of one, were all related to each other, linked by one distinct royal descendant. Bridget reportedly completed this project with a little help from her grandparents, and the one president they were unable to link to the common descendant was Martin Van Buren, the 8th president of the United States, but the first president to actually be born a citizen of the United States, unlike the 7 presidents before him who were born British subjects. At 5'6", Van Buren's nickname was the Little Magician, because he was quite the compelling guy, or at least Yale's Skull and Bones not-so-secret society must have thought so, as Van Buren's skull is rumored to reside within the school's tombs. Bridget traced all of the presidents back to King John of the House Plantagenet. The House of Plantagenet, with the surname having etymological roots in Old English, meaning sprig of bloom or young tree. According to the legend that's still being circulated today, the Plantagenets were descended from a demon, which served as an explanation of their ferocity and seemingly supernatural success on the battlefield. King John's reputation doesn't really improve from his familial lore. You were probably introduced to him as a child, as the villain in the tales of Robin Hood, as the ruler of a vast international empire who held the most important and powerful dominion over Europe at that time. There's next to nothing flattering written about King John. During the age of chivalry, he was callous and cruel, orchestrating one bloody betrayal after another, relishing in the conflict he created in his own court, starving his captives to death, and most of all, oppressing his subjects. One of the lovely fairy tales taught within the confines of the classroom assures us that the era of kings being able to do whatever they pleased, whenever they pleased, ended with King John, as he's most known for granting the Magna Carta, a document that was based on the Charter of Liberties and whipped up by the Archbishop of Canterbury as a practical solution to a political problem. You see, King John had managed to annoy everyone with his disastrous military campaigns. And he specifically ticked off his barons because he attempted to extort money from them. So as a peace treaty of sorts, the Magna Carta served to place limits on the power of the crown, theoretically ensuring King John's actions would not be repeated by a future ruler, and to this day still symbolizes the rights of a subject against the power of a tyrant, even though the document definitely didn't apply to all people at that time, just nobility. Sorry, poor people, you lose again. But nonetheless, it was the first step towards the justice system we know today. King John granted the Magna Carta in 1215, but by the next year he had kicked the bucket, with his legacy being that he managed to lose the empire his family had attained. His funeral broke tradition as he wasn't buried with his crown, and records of his death indicate that he was little mourned, and mentioned that his subjects thought him to be suffering in the torments of hell. Even his queen abandoned 4 of their 5 children and wasted no time to start a new life with a lover from her past, never to publicly mention her late husband again. Pretty spicy, right? Curiously, in 1797, King John's body was exhumed and the townspeople pilfered parts of his remains, keeping them as souvenirs. Comment below if you would have kept a piece of King John as a souvenir. Your honesty, as always, is appreciated. Before a 7th grader connected all of the presidents back to King John, there was a guy making headlines in his attempt to discover if and how bloodlines played into power. As the son of a Washington, D.C. attorney, this Harvard graduate, classmate of Ted Kennedy and ex-husband of a French countess, Harold Brooks Baker often made comments about the British royal family to the press and advocated his most royal candidate theory with each United States presidential election, with the theory being that the winning candidate would always have the greatest percentage of royal blood. His theory held water up until the 2004 presidential election, when he guessed that John Kerry would be the winner, given that he had more royal blood than George W. Bush. Brooks Baker kicked the bucket a few months later, but his theory lived on. Much like Bridge-Ann's project, the media drooled all over themselves whenever Brooks Baker spoke. And the propagation of his most royal candidate theory has served to push another theory, that presidents are selected, not elected, and specifically their selection is based on their pedigree. To reiterate, the basis of this theory is that a candidate does not achieve presidency because of their ambition, charisma, skill set, or ability to get the most people to vote for them. The candidate ascends to presidency because they are selected by their bloodline, a bloodline that can be traced back to House of Plantagenet.
In either of those first two books, though, who knew you and Dick Cheney cousins?
You know, listen, I don't think I'm going to the family reunion. I don't know how I'll be greeted. But no, you know, these folks have been doing all these genealogies on me, and
Right.
you know, they've found all sorts of strange connections.
This has got to be the strangest, though.
Well, listen, if you go back far enough,
Yeah.
you know, you got all kinds of crooks and thieves in your family. I'm not necessarily drawing that analogy.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, you don't know who's back there.
What did you make of that story? For those who don't know this, so Lynn Cheney, the vice president's wife, has been doing some genealogy connected to her latest book, and lo and behold, way back, 8 generations ago?
8 generations or
you
something.
and Mr. Cheney apparently have some distant relative. What did you make of that story when it came
You know,
out?
I actually knew about it because somebody had done some genealogy before, and they had sent it to me, this long sheet, and, you know, had all these famous names, you know, Mark Twain and this and that and the other, and then Dick Cheney, and I took a pause. You know, I just said, well, you know, as long as he's okay with it, I'm okay with it too, because I'm not going to stop talking about these messed up policies in Iraq. just because
your cousin.
Yeah, we're not kissing cousins, as they say.
September the 11th was a monumental day in our nation's history. It was a significant day, and it was obviously, it changed my presidency. I went from being a president that was primarily focused on domestic issues to a wartime president. Something I never anticipated, nor something I ever wanted. You know, provide help to New York City, whatever help they needed to take care of this incident, and then walk into the classroom. Good morning. The classroom was full of kids who were reading.
Read this word the fast way. Ready? Yes, ma'am. You ready? Yes, ma'am.
In the back of the classroom was a full press corps and staffers and some adults. And I'm intently listening to the lesson.
These words the fast way. Get ready? Yes.
And I felt a presence behind me. And Andy Card's Massachusetts accent was whispering in my ear, a second plane has hit the second tower. America is under attack.
is the most powerful person in the world. He commands the greatest military in history.
On the School Watch tonight, the story of a 7th grader from Salinas who claims to have made a major discovery about President Obama. She and her grandfather say that President Obama is related to all but one U.S. president. We get more tonight from Action News reporter Felix Cortez, who's live in our Salinas newsroom.
Well, Dan, the youngster spent the summer, really all summer, tracing the family tree of our presidents. Her conclusion that all the presidents, with the exception of one, share the same grandfather.
Well, first we start off with George Washington at the top, and then it goes to John Adams, Thomas Jefferson.
11-year-old Bridget Davignon says she's made a first-of-its-kind discovery that President Obama and all the presidents before him, with the exception of one, are related and descendants of a former king of England.
No, they are all cousins, and they're grandsons of John Lackland.
Davignon says she spent countless hours on the internet over the summer researching the lineage of our presidents, a project that started with her trying to trace her own family tree.
But I'm the first historian to do all the presidents. I'm very glad I got this done, and I think it will turn out to be a success.
The Monte Vista Christian 7th grader has written President Obama to tell him the presidents before him are his cousins. She hopes to present this family tree chart personally to the president. But Bridget has her skeptics, including this reporter. Her biggest supporter and firm believer that Obama is a descendant of a former king of England is no doubt her mother.
You have a child, and they 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 have a child. All we're saying, all she's saying is this guy is the 25th, 27th, depending on what line it is. He created all this family.
Every presidential election in America, since and including George Washington in 1789 to Bill Clinton, has been won by the candidate with the most British and French royal genes. Of the 42 presidents to Clinton, 33 have been related to two people: Alfred the Great, King of England, and Charlemagne, the most famous monarch of France. So it goes on. 19 of them are related to the England's Edward III, who has 2,000 blood connections to Prince Charles. The same goes with the banking families in America. George Bush and Barbara Bush are from the same bloodline, the Pierce bloodline, which changed its name from Percy when it crossed the Atlantic. Percy is one of the aristocratic families of Britain to this day. They were involved in the gunpowder plot to blow up Parliament at the time of Guy Fawkes. If America declared its independence from the European monarchies in 1776, how is it possible that every single president has descended from European monarchs? If presidents are democratically elected as we are told, what are the odds that we would always choose members of British and French royal bloodlines to lead us? The Americas have always been owned and governed by the same royal families of Britain and Europe that conventional history states as being among those defeated during the wars of so-called independence. If it really is the land of the free and the home of the brave as claimed, then anyone in reality can become president, except that every president since George Washington to Barack Obama have been genetically related. The presidents of the United States are as much a royal dynasty as anything in Europe. The United States presidents are not chosen by ballot. They are chosen by blood. Granted, the relationships are sometimes distant, 10th or 15th cousins, but in a country with hundreds of millions to choose from, this simply cannot be chance or coincidence. George W. Bush himself is directly related to 16 former U.S. presidents, including George Washington, Millard Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses Grant, Rutherford B. Hayes, James Garfield, Grover Cleveland, Teddy Roosevelt, William H. Taft, Calvin Coolidge, Herbert Hoover, Franklin D. Roosevelt, Richard Nixon, and Gerald Ford. Bush is closely related to the King of Albania and has kinship with every member of the British royal family and the House of Windsor. He is related to 20 British dukes, the 13th cousin of Britain's Queen Mother, and of her daughter, Queen Elizabeth. He is 13th cousin, once removed from Prince Charles, and has direct descent from King Henry III, Charles II, and Edward I of England. Through the House of Windsor and King Henry III, the Bushes and Bill Clinton are genetically related as well. In 2004, George W. Bush ran as a Republican against Democrat John Forbes Kerry, his 16th cousin. These cousins, related to the same British and French monarchs, are also secret society brothers in the infamous Skull and Bones fraternity. John Kerry descends from King Henry II of England and Richard the Lionheart, leader of the Third Christian Crusade in 1189. He also has links to royalty in Albania, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Russia, Persia, and France, but still not enough royal genes to top George Bush. Earlier in 2000, we see the same story. George W. Bush ran neck and neck with Al Gore, another supposed Democrat and cousin of the Bush family. Al Gore is a descendant of Edward I, Roman emperors Louis I, II, and Charles II, and is a direct descendant of Charlemagne, which makes him a distant cousin of Richard Nixon and George W. Bush. So the top Democratic candidates against Bush in 2000 and 2004 were actually his cousins. By placing bloodline members on both sides of America's false political circus, the old monarchs have guaranteed their right to throne under the guise of democratic elections. Back in 1996, we see the same tactic as Democrat Bill Clinton defeated Republican Bob Dole, his cousin. Even Bill Clinton and Bob Dole, who opposed each other at the 1996 election, are distant cousins. They can trace their ancestry to England's King Henry III. Clinton has far more royal blood than Dole, and is directly descended from the same bloodline as the House of Windsor. Every Scottish monarch and King Robert I of France. The Windsor-Bush bloodline reaches from the American presidents back to British European royalty, and it doesn't stop there. It continues back to the Roman emperors all the way to Babylonian kings and Egyptian pharaohs near the beginning of recorded history.
But let's talk about flags, because flags are symbols, and symbols represent the icons of what we are and who we are, and very important. The flag proudly waved as the banners, the bombs bursted in air, as the song goes, right? Well, guess what our little design looks like? I mean, here we are, and can you imagine the conversation that they had with Thomas and Samuel Adams and Ben Franklin and these guys when they decided to design the new country's flag? And it's just another lie that Betsy Ross designed the flag. It had nothing to do with Betsy Ross. That's just another story, lie. And they said to Betsy, hey, Betsy says to him, hey, what kind of flag do you guys want? We can start our own country. We can do whatever we want. And they thought about it, and they thought about it, and they came back to her and they said, hey, you know what? The British have some awesome colors. Why don't we just copy their flag and maybe leave out the cross, because people might think that's the Knights of Malta. We know Columbus had the cross, the Red Cross going. We know the British have the Red Cross going. We know that Switzerland has the Red Cross going. So maybe we should leave that out so people don't get the wrong idea. But those British colors are really cool. Well, let's do that. Well, folks, did you know that the East Indian Tea Company had almost the same exact motif? In fact, their flag of our ancestors is the same flag as the East Indian Tea Company, the ones we were supposed to overthrow. Here's the United States of America flag from 1775 to 1777. They didn't change it much, folks. And if you look through the flags in history, this is the flags of Washington, D.C. Do you get the idea? The red and white stripes, the stars, same as the British. And the red and white and blue motif is carried out in all these flags of Chile, of France. I mean, you just go down the list of all these countries with all these flags in here, red, white, and blue. Now, we have an international government in place, the World Health Organization and all the Bank of International Settlements that controls all the central banks and the Federal Reserve. So it's complete fallacy that the United States is independent in any way. And here the flags are all designed in red, white, and blue. Is that just another coincidence, or are we being played? All right, so let's get on to the family bloodlines and start looking into the history of the presidents, all presidents having the exact same blood lineage as their ancestors across the pond in France and England. Here we see President Bush and all the relations in his bloodline he has to Princess Di, to Madonna, Brad Pitt, Barack Obama. You heard him talk about Dick Cheney being related, ninth cousin once removed. So let's get into this a little more. David Icke has this to say: if it really is the land of the free, and if, as claimed, anyone can really become president, if you got billions of dollars and the connections with the bankers, you'd be fairly expected the 43 presidents from George Washington to Bush would express that genetic diversity. The President of the United States are as much a royal dynasty as anything in Europe from whence these bloodlines came. Have you ever wondered why John Kerry, Dick Cheney, and Bush, the Clintons, all never go out of office? Why did the Bushes, Reagan, Allen Greenspan, Giuliani, General Wesley Clark, General Caspar Weinberger, all make it a point to England to be knighted by the Queen by the highest royal order of their service, being service to the Queen, folks, and they get knighted for it. So, common grandfather to all is King John, the signer of the Magna Carta. I came across a researcher from Ancestry.com named Tim Dowling on a site reproduced below. Mr. Dowling has connected the trees of all U.S. presidents to the Plantagenet King John circa 1200 A.D. It should be noted that Americans whose ancestors came from continental Europe in the 19th century are unlikely to easily delineate descent from Charlemagne in their background. There was a separation of classes in Europe, and the blood of the rulers seldom flowed legitimately into the blood of nobility and commoners. This is from Jewels of the Crown. And also it's been revealed that Charlemagne could be a made-up historical figure as well, so just be careful on that name. If America declared its independence from the York monarchies in 1776, how is it possible that every single president has descended from European monarchs? The Americans have always owned and governed by the same royal families of Britain and Europe that conventional history states as being among those defeated during the wars of the so-called independence. Michael Nazarian. Bush is closely related to the King of Albania in his kinship with every member of the British royal family in the House of Windsor. Related to 20 British dukes, 13 cousins of British Queen Mother and her daughter, Queen Elizabeth. He is a 13th cousin once removed from Prince Charles. On and on. Since we know the United States of America is a D.C. corporation owned by the Crown of England, and the fact that this country has been ruled by maritime law under the Holy See of the Vatican, it is not too far a stretch at all to understand that every single appointment of U.S. presidents are related and carry only a negative blood type traced back to their ancestral royal bloodlines. So anybody who says that we're all related, the negative bloodline is a rare type. Most people's blood types are O types, and we'll get into that a little bit too. So you saw in the 12-year-old girl that documented the relationship and did the, quote, discovery that all the presidents were related, but I think it was Van Buren, the one that she didn't find. Well, if you don't believe her, how about the New York Times in 1988? Quote, going by the statistics of the past, Mr. Bush, the next president, this is from a 162-year-old directory of British nobility from Burke's Peerage Ltd. Limited, a very prestigious genealogy company for 162 years. He released a report tracing the vice president's family tree to the 1400s. William Ward found that Mr. Bush has more connections to the British and European royalty than any president of the United States. Queen's 14th cousin. Of the 40 American presidents, 13 have had a direct connection to European royalty. American presidents have been at least 6 times more likely to have royal blood than people who elected them. Quote, these genes or chromosomes for leaders come forward whether it's kings or presidents. You cannot hold back the genes. Book steerage traced the Bush family tree of the 1400s. He's a direct descendant of King Henry VII and one of Charles II's mistresses and Henry VIII's younger sister Mary, who married King Louis XII of France. American roots, Charles II's mistress Barbara Villiers lived from 1641 to 1706, cousin of the vice president's great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. According to Burke's, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Quincy Adams were all related to Edward I. What are the odds? In the 20th century, Theodore Roosevelt and Franklin Delano Roosevelt were descended from the Dutch nobility. Jimmy Carter has kinship ties to noble Scottish and English families, while President Reagan is a direct descendant of the 11th century High King of Ireland, Brian Boru. By placing bloodline members of both sides in the Americans' faux political dichotomy, the old monarchs have guaranteed their right to the throne under the guise of democratic elections. So you can go on, and I'll put this article I wrote a while ago in the show notes, and you can click on all these links in here and see how they're all related. Again, from the New York Times, I believe this is, President Barack has family ties to none other than Sarah Palin. Ancestry.com has revealed in the past that Obama is related to investor Warren Buffett and Brad Pitt. He's a distant, former Alaska governor, Republican vice presidential candidate, is a distant cousin of Franklin D. Roosevelt and Princess Diana. President George Bush is not only the son of President Bush the elder, but he's related to Vice President Cheney and the presumptive next President Obama. This was written a little while ago. Tom Hanks, Marilyn Monroe, Madonna, Celine Dion, Hugh Hefner, all related by blood, negative blood. So I'm not quite sure on this article about the connection between David Rockefeller and the guy that runs Facebook, the young kid, Mark Zuckerberg, who came out of nowhere, Cinderella story, creates Facebook, and now he's a multi-gazillionaire. But this article goes into it. Jacob Greenberg was arrested for possession of marijuana, and this was his mugshot. It was later revealed that he could be indeed the man the world knows as Mark Zuckerberg. His family members include David Rockefeller, a grandfather. A little strange because Rockefeller owns 8% of Facebook. I don't put a lot of faith in that, but I just want to bring that out. Al Gore. Gore's family members weren't exactly peasants. Family tree again, tied to Charlemagne and 3 Holy Roman empires. Remember, we're under Holy Roman Latin law in our legal system. Remember that Washington, D.C., the name of the land before it was Washington, D.C. in 1871, was named Rome, Maryland, with 7 hills, that was founded by John Carroll, richest man in the country in the 1870s, who founded Georgetown University, the Jesuit, a year before Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is a private corporation founded by the Organic Act in 1871, beholden to no other country. It holds our Congress, our president, and our supreme law of the land, Supreme Court, all in this one little area that rules over all of us and we send all our money to. John Kerry. Kerry can almost certainly be traced back to King James I. Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was born William Jefferson Blythe. How many knows that? Took his stepfather's name as a teenager. His ancestry can trace back to his mother's side to King Henry III. Furthermore, he's related to every Scottish monarch in the British royal family. Bill Clinton's family goes back to William Henry Harrison and Benjamin Harrison, making him related to Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter. Again, makes him near kin to Richard Nixon and George Bush. What are the odds, folks? According to Burke's Peerage, even according to official genealogy, Bill Clinton is genetically related to the House of Windsor, the present royal family in Britain, to every Scottish monarch, to King Henry III of England and Robert I of France. Burke's Steerage and Barontage and Burke's Landed Gentry have for 175 years recorded the genealogies of UK and Ireland's titled and landed families. George 2004, George Bush ran against John Kerry, and you remember the hanging Chad and all that. Well, the reason why Bush was selected and put into the presidency was because his bloodline was a little more pure than John Kerry. Remember, John Kerry's married to the Heinz woman, the Heinz ketchup dynasty, and I'm sure she's probably in the mix as well, in the bloodlines as well. All right, this is from Harold Books Baker Burke's Peerage Publishing in an article in Nexus magazine. Never in the history of the United States have two presidential candidates been as well endowed with royal alliances. There's always been a significant royal factor in those aspired to the White House. Al Gore, a descendant of Edward I, he's also a cousin of first President Nixon. Al Gore does have direct links to the Holy Roman Empire. On and on it goes, folks. Even Bill Clinton and Bob Dole, who opposed each other in 1996, are distant cousins. Father George and wife Barbara Bush are both descendants of Godefroy de Bouillon, who in 1099 led the European noblemen in the successful crusade to capture Jerusalem from the Islamic faith and moved into the King's Palace of the Temple Mount. Let's take a quick sidebar to the Modern Gnostic website and take a little quick look at Barbara Bush here. I got to reduce this down so we can see it, but Barbara Bush is possibly related to one Aleister Crowley, the guy that does the dark magic. Shown here, born Pauline Robinson, whose third child was named Barbara. Most sources divulge little about this woman. We learn more about her husband from Marvin Pierce, the president of McCall Corporation, who published McCall's magazines and Red Book. Let me see if I can reduce this down a little. When Crowley was 50 years old, he was residing in the home of Frank and Nellie O'Hara in Paris. In early 1924, Nellie was visited by her American friend Pauline Pierce. Remember, it's Barbara Bush Nee Pierce. During Pauline's visit, Crowley underwent what he termed a supreme ordeal, an initiation to Masonic Ipsissimus grade, the highest magical achievement in this order. The initiation rite, choosing one or more experienced attendants charged with arousing and exhausting him sexually by every means possible, employing every artifice and stimulant. In that place and time, Nellie and Pauline were the most suited for this task. Pauline returned to America, and on June 8, 1925, 8 months after Crowley's supreme ordeal, Pauline gave birth to a daughter she named Barbara. Barbara grew up to marry George Bush, who later became president of the United States. So is Crowley the president? Is Crowley the father of Barbara Bush? All right. So back to the bloodlines. Now we can see. Let me get this back up again here. The same bloodline also includes key Scottish families, Lord Galloway and the Commons, Mary Louise of Austria, who married Napoleon Bonaparte. On and on it goes, country after country. This bloodline connects into every surviving royal family in Europe, including King Juan Carlos of Spain and the Dutch, Swedish, and Danish royal family lines. King Carlos of Spain is very highly connected to the Jesuits and the Knights of Malta. All right, so in the blood, this is all about the blood. And I don't know how many people know that blood is mentioned more often than any other word in the Bible except God. There's a connection between the blood and the gods. In one day, your blood travels 12,000 miles. Your heart beats around 35 million times per year. Your heart pumps 1 million barrels of blood during the average lifetime, enough to fill 3 super tankers. Our human bodies are amazing. Let's take care of them, folks. All right, you've heard of the blue bloodline. Where does that come from? Negative blood, especially Rh negative, has a higher copper content than positive iron blood, which is where blue blood actually comes from. Bush was awarded the presidency in 2004 because he had more blue blood than Gore. The idiom originates from ancient and medieval societies of Europe and distinguishes an upper class whose superficial veins appear blue through their untanned skin from a working class of the time. It was the Spaniards who gave the world the notion that an aristocrat's blood is not red but blue. The Spanish nobility started taking shape around the 9th century in classic military fashion, occupying land as warriors on horseback. They were to continue the process for more than 500 years, clawing back sections of the peninsula and Moorish empires. It's demonstrated his degree by holding up his sword to display the filigree of blue-blooded veins beneath his pale skin, and it was proof that his birth had not been contaminated by the dark-skinned enemy. So look at all these presidents with negative blood types that we know about, and if you Google blood types on presidents, you're not going to find very much. They keep it very private. Eisenhower, Kennedy, Nixon, Clinton, Bush. What are the odds? Only negative and negative blood can keep a pure bloodline intact. Any positive type blood will make it impure and break the lineage. It is believed by many that all presidents are negative blood type. Why do we have many in power who make the pilgrimage to England to grovel at the foot of the Queen to be knighted? Reagan was made an honorary knight, Grand Cross of the Most Honorable Order of the Bath, the highest honor that Britain gives to Americans, because he was servicing the needs of the British Empire, folks. The City of London is where the money goes. The Vatican is where the religion is run. And the U.S., Washington, D.C., is the military operation. And it's been this way for a long, long time. Now, the original 13th article of the amendment in the Bill of Rights was amended in 1868, I believe. But originally, they did not allow any nobility to be president. So they had to get rid of this because every president was part of the nobility. And it said, if any citizen of the United States shall accept, claim, receive, or retain any title of nobility or honor without the consent of Congress, and accept and retain any present, pension, office of any kind whatsoever from any empire, king, prince, or foreign power, such person shall cease to be a citizen of the United States. So the breach of the 13th Amendment came bowing from the head, not to the waist of Queen Elizabeth. Sir Rudy Giuliani joined Billy Graham, Steven Spielberg, IBM CEO Lou Gessner, Ronald Reagan, Norman Schwarzkopf, the head of the Iraq War, Desert Storm, and other knightly relics of the British attempt to persuade Washington that special relationships between the two countries mean something more than what Tony Blair is doing what he's told. However, as Sir Rudy received his Gong Medal from the British Queen, he had more relevant role as a model as an honorary Knight Commander of the most excellent order of the British Empire. Now, do you remember World Trade Center 7? We had Sir Rudy's command center was sitting up there on, I think it was the 36th floor. That was destroyed when the World Trade Center came down 20 minutes in advance told on its own footprint in a little over 10 seconds, 47-story building not hit by any planes. It also housed all the information for Enron and a bunch of FBI and Secret Service rooms or floors as well. George Bush appointed Knight Grand Cross of Honorable Order of Bath. Again, why are they honoring the United States? Why are they doing this? And it goes on and on. Tom Foley, Speaker of the House, United States Representative, member of the Order of the British Empire. Alan Greenspan, who ran our money system. The Federal Reserve is no more federal than Federal Express. Created in 1913, it's a private enterprise, made $77 billion in 2012 in net profits. It's a corporation. It's not beholden to anything in the United States. Government, Treasury, it gets printed, it prints money at interest for the United States. So the more debt we get, the more money they make. Greenspan got knighted for that. And then we get into Michelle Obama and her white ancestry, which I'm not going to go into. Today, genealogy ranks only second to porn as the most searched topic online. So here's just a few more famous people who were knighted by the Queen. Bill Graham. Why would Bill Graham, an evangelist, be knighted by the Queen? Paul McCartney, of course. Isaac Newton. What did he do? Well, he created the whole round ball earth momentum gravity not weight theory that everybody takes in today. Bill Gates. Well, who's Bill Gates, right? Vaccine depopulation. Arthur C. Clarke, the man who wrote all, notice the satellite dish in the back. He started all the fiction about the fake space and all that. Alfred Hitchcock, the movies. These are all Americans. A lot of these are Americans, folks. Bob Hope. Why are so many Americans being knighted by the Queen? Because they're being of service to the crown. All right? So let's keep that in mind. So here's what I was referring to. After 10 generations, or about 250 years, the average person will have 1,024 descendants. Between 10 and 15 generations in the inflection point, the number of your ancestors explodes to most of the population living in a specific part. But again, Rh negative bloodline, less than 15% of the population, folks. Others with the same ancestry as the presidents: Justin Bieber, Beyonce, Alison Morissette, Madonna, Shania Twain, Ben Affleck, Samuel Adams, John Hancock, John Wayne, John Adams, Matt Damon. And I'll put these in the show notes of the rest of these, people that are all just related to each other. Angela Jolie, she's with the Trilateral Commission, and you don't get in power. George Clooney, related to Abraham Lincoln. So I'll put these in the show notes. That's all I got for now. Please pass the word on. These are not elections, they're selections. We've been run, and the show has been governed for a very, very long time from across the pond, from England and France. who are run by the Vatican and the Jesuits and the Society of Jesus. So please help educate others once you educate yourself, and let's end this madness. All right. Peace out. We'll catch you on the next one. Take care.